I slammed the car door shut, my heels clicking against the pavement as I marched toward our suburban home. The setting sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, but the beauty was lost on me. My mind raced, replaying the conversation I'd overheard at work. "Did you hear about Anthony?" whispered Jessica from accounting. "Apparently he's been seen around town with some young blonde." I'd brushed it off then, but doubt gnawed at me now. Anthony and I had always been different. Me, the career-driven powerhouse. Him, the supportive homebody. It worked for us, or so I thought. As I reached for my keys, the front door swung open. There stood Anthony, his salt and pepper hair tousled, wearing that goofy, kiss-the-cook apron I'd bought him years ago. "Kate, you're home early," he said, surprise evident in his voice. I was just about to start dinner. I pushed past him, tossing my briefcase onto the entryway table. "We need to talk, Anthony." He followed me into the kitchen, concern etching his features. "What's wrong, honey? Rough day at work?" I spun to face him, my eyes narrowing. "Where were you last Tuesday evening?" Anthony's brow furrowed. "Tuesday, I was at the gym, I think. Why?" "The gym," I repeated, my voice flat. "Funny, because Jessica from accounting saw you at Rosario's, with a blonde." His face paled, and for a moment I saw guilt flash in his eyes before he composed himself. "Kate, it's not what you think. That was Beth from my book club. We grabbed a quick bite after the meeting ran late." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to, but something didn't sit right. "Book club? Since when are you in a book club?" Anthony sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I joined a few months ago. I thought it might give us something to talk about besides your work." The words stung, but I pushed the hurt aside. "And you didn't think to mention this?" "Honestly, I didn't think you'd care," he said softly. We stood there, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. I was about to press further when my phone buzzed, a text from my boss. "Big news. Call me ASAP." I glanced at Anthony, torn between my suspicions and my career. "This isn't over," I said, grabbing my phone and heading to the study. 10 minutes later, I emerged, my head spinning. A promotion. A big one. But it came with a catch, a 2-year assignment in Chicago. I found Anthony in the living room, pretending to read a book. "That was work," I said, perching on the arm of the sofa. "They've offered me a promotion." His eyes lit up. "Kate, that's fantastic. I'm so proud of you." For a moment, I saw the man I fell in love with, supportive, kind, always in my corner. But then I remembered the blonde, the lies, and my heart hardened. "It's in Chicago," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "For 2 years. Anthony's smile faltered. "Oh, I see." "I haven't accepted yet," I added quickly. "I wanted to discuss it with you first." He nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the carpet. "It's a great opportunity, Kate. You should take it." His easy acquiescence surprised me. Shouldn't he fight for us? Ask me to stay? Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Anthony jumped up. "I'll get it," he said, relief evident in his voice. I heard muffled voices at the door, then Anthony called out, "Kate, there's someone here to see you." Curious, I made my way to the entryway. There, holding a thick manila envelope, stood a man in a crisp suit. "Catherine Lawson?" he asked. I nodded, a sense of dread washing over me. "This is for you," he said, handing me the envelope. "You've been served." As the man turned and left, I stared at the envelope in my hands, my world tilting on its axis. What fresh hell was this? I looked up at Anthony, his face a mask of confusion and concern. In that moment, I knew our comfortable life was about to be shattered. The only question was, how many pieces would be left when the dust settled? I stared at the pregnancy test, the 2 pink lines mocking me. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when everything was falling apart. The manila envelope from last night lay unopened on the bathroom counter. I didn't need to look inside to know what it contained. Divorce papers. Anthony's ultimate betrayal. A knock on the door startled me. "Kate, are you okay in there?" Anthony's voice, laced with concern, made my stomach churn. I shoved the test into my pocket and opened the door. "I'm fine," I lied, brushing past him. He caught my arm gently. "Kate, we need to talk about last night, about the papers." I yanked my arm away. "There's nothing to talk about. You want a divorce? Fine, but don't expect me to make it easy for you." Anthony's face crumpled. "It's not what you think. I didn't file for divorce. Those papers, they're from my mother." I froze, confusion replacing anger. "Your mother? What are you talking about?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Remember that letter you found last month? The one hinting at some family secret?" I nodded, recalling the cryptic message that had set my suspicions in motion. Well, those papers explain everything. My mother, she's not who I thought she was, and neither am I. Before he could elaborate, my phone rang. It was my boss again. I have to take this, I said, grateful for the interruption. 10 minutes later, I emerged from the study, my mind reeling. The promotion was official, but the timeline had been moved up. They wanted me in Chicago by the end of the week. I found Anthony in the kitchen, the envelope's contents spread across the table. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. "They want me in Chicago by Friday," I blurted out. He looked up, startled. "What? But that's so soon." "I know, but this opportunity, Anthony, it could change everything for us." He laughed bitterly. "Us? Kate, did you even look at these papers? My whole life is a lie. I don't even know who I am anymore." I felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. "We can figure this out, together. Maybe this move is exactly what we need, a fresh start." Anthony shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? Your career has always come first, even now, when our marriage is falling apart, when my world is crumbling. All you can think about is your next big move." His words stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. "That's not fair. I've worked hard to get where I am. And I've worked hard to support you," he shot back. "But at what cost? We're strangers, Kate, living separate lives under the same roof." I opened my mouth to argue, but nausea hit me like a wave. I bolted for the bathroom, barely making it in time. As I retched into the toilet, I felt Anthony's presence behind me. "Kate, are you sick?" I wiped my mouth, avoiding his gaze. "I'm fine. Must be something I ate." But as I stood, the pregnancy test fell from my pocket. Anthony's eyes widened as he saw it. Are you?" I nodded, tears welling up. "I just found out this morning." For a moment, joy flickered across his face. Then reality set in. "The job in Chicago, what are you going to do?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I placed a hand on my stomach, torn between my career ambitions and the new life growing inside me. "I don't know," I whispered. "I honestly don't know." Anthony reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly. "Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, for both of you." His words should have comforted me. Instead, they filled me with dread. How could I trust him after everything? And how could I possibly choose between my dream job and this unexpected pregnancy? As we stood there, the bathroom suddenly feeling claustrophobic, I realized our comfortable life wasn't just shattered. It was obliterated, and the pieces left behind were sharper and more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The Chicago skyline loomed before me as I stepped out of the taxi, my hand instinctively resting on my still flat stomach. 1 month into my new job, and I was already feeling the weight of my decision. "Miss Lawson?" A crisp voice cut through my thoughts. "I'm Amanda, your new assistant. Mr. Donovan is waiting for you in the conference room." I nodded, straightening my blazer. "Thank you, Amanda. Let's not keep him waiting." As we walked through the sleek office, I could feel eyes on me. Whispers followed in my wake. I'd heard the rumors, the ruthless corporate climber who'd left her husband behind for a promotion. If only they knew the whole story. Mr. Donovan, my new boss, greeted me with a shark-like smile. "Kate, just the woman I wanted to see. We've got a situation with the Hendricks account." I spent the next hour in a heated debate, defending our strategy. By the time I left the conference room, my head was pounding and my stomach was churning. "Are you all right, Miss Lawson?" Amanda asked, concern etching her features. I waved her off. "Just a bit of nausea. It'll pass." Back in my office, I collapsed into my chair, exhaustion washing over me. My phone buzzed, a message from Anthony. "Hope you're settling in well. We need to talk about the papers from my mother. Call me when you can." I sighed, guilt and frustration warring within me. I hadn't told him I was keeping the baby. I hadn't told anyone. A knock at my door startled me. "Come in," I called, quickly composing myself. A tall, handsome man entered, his smile warm but his eyes calculating. "Kate Lawson? I'm Jason Hendricks. I believe we have some business to discuss." My eyes widened. This was the CEO of Hendricks Corp., the account I'd just been arguing about. "Mr. Hendricks, what a surprise. Please have a seat." As we talked, I found myself drawn to Jason's charisma and quick wit. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, I felt a spark of excitement that had nothing to do with work. Our meeting ran late into the evening. As we wrapped up, Jason leaned in, his voice low. "You know, Kate, I have a feeling we could work well together. How about dinner tomorrow night? To discuss the account, of course. I hesitated, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mr. Hendricks. His eyes followed my movement, understanding dawning on his face. Ah, I see. Congratulations are in order, then? I felt the blood drain from my face. How did you? Jason smiled kindly. I have 3 kids of my own. I recognize the signs. Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. As he left, I slumped in my chair, my mind reeling. How long could I keep this pregnancy hidden? And what would it mean for my career? My phone buzzed again, another message from Anthony. Kate, please call me. It's important. With shaking hands, I dialed his number. His voice, when he answered, was tense. Kate, thank God, I've been trying to reach you all day. What's wrong, Anthony? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. He took a deep breath. It's about the papers from my mother. I'm not who I thought I was. My father, he's not my biological father. I gasped, the implications hitting me like a freight train. What are you saying, Anthony? I'm saying, he replied, his voice breaking, that the man I thought was my father, he's actually my uncle, and the woman I've known as my aunt, she's my biological mother. The room spun around me as the weight of his words sank in. Just when I thought our lives couldn't get more complicated, this bombshell dropped. There's more, Anthony continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Kate, I think I might have a half-sister, and I think she might be in Chicago. As the words left his mouth, a knock at my office door made me jump. I looked up to see Amanda, her face pale. Ms. Lawson, there's someone here to see you. She says she's Anthony's sister. I stared at the woman sitting across from me, searching for any resemblance to Anthony. She introduced herself as Melissa, and the family resemblance was undeniable. The same warm brown eyes, the dimple in her left cheek when she smiled nervously. I'm sorry to barge in like this, Melissa said, fidgeting with her purse strap. I only found out about Anthony a few weeks ago. When I learned his wife was working here in Chicago, I couldn't resist the chance to meet you. My head spun. How did you find me? She looked sheepish. I may have done some light stalking on social media. I hope you don't mind. I forced a smile, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach. It's a lot to take in. Melissa nodded, her eyes following my movement. Her gaze lingered on my midsection, and I saw a flicker of understanding cross her face. Before she could comment, my phone buzzed insistently. Excuse me, I said, glancing at the screen. It was Jason Hendricks. Again, I need to take this. Stepping out of my office, I answered the call. Mr. Hendricks, what can I do for you? Kate, I need you at the gala tonight. Jason's voice was urgent. The board members will all be there, and I want to introduce you as the brains behind our new strategy. I hesitated, glancing back at my office where Melissa waited. I'm not sure I can make it on such short notice. Kate, Jason's tone softened, this could make or break your career here. I need you by my side tonight. The weight of his words settled on me. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for, the chance to solidify my position in the company. But as I ended the call, agreeing to attend, guilt gnawed at me. Returning to my office, I found Melissa examining a photo on my desk. Anthony and me on our wedding day. He looks so happy, she murmured, then turned to me with a sad smile. I'm sorry, I shouldn't pry. This must be overwhelming for you. I nodded, sinking into my chair. It's been a challenging few months. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes kind. Kate, I hope my presence doesn't complicate things further. I wanted to know my brother and his family. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Family. The baby I was carrying, Anthony's child, would be her niece or nephew. A secret I was still keeping from everyone, including Anthony. I appreciate that, Melissa, I said, my voice strained. But I'm afraid I have a work engagement tonight. Perhaps we could continue this conversation another time? As I ushered her out, promising to be in touch, my phone buzzed again. A text from Anthony. Haven't heard from you. Everything okay? Miss you. I stared at the message, guilt and longing warring within me. When was the last time we'd really talked? The distance between us seemed to grow with each passing day. Hours later, I stood before the mirror in my hotel room, smoothing down my gown. The fabric clung to my body, and I realized with a start that a small bump was beginning to show. Panic rose in my throat. How long could I keep this secret? As I entered the gala, Jason immediately appeared at my side, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me towards a group of stern-looking men in expensive suits. "Gentlemen," Jason announced, his voice proud, "I'd like you to meet Kate Lawson, the woman who's going to revolutionize our approach to the Hendricks account." I plastered on my most confident smile, pushing thoughts of Anthony, Melissa, and the baby to the back of my mind. This was my moment, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. But as I shook hands and made small talk, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping away. Something far more precious than any career advancement. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Another message from Anthony. "Kate, we really need to talk. It's important. Please call me." In that moment, surrounded by the glittering elite of Chicago's business world, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. The path I chose tonight would change everything. My career, my marriage, my future. The question was, which path would I take? The taxi pulled up to our house, and I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my pregnancy. After weeks of dodging Anthony's calls and ignoring my doctor's warnings about stress, I was finally home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. I paid the driver and dragged my suitcase up the familiar path. The garden Anthony had lovingly tended was overgrown, weeds choking out the flowers we'd planted together. A bad omen if I ever saw one. My key turned in the lock, and I stepped into the silent house. "Anthony?" I called out, my voice echoing in the emptiness. No response. I made my way upstairs, my hand unconsciously resting on my now visible baby bump. The bedroom door was ajar, and I pushed it open, freezing at the sight before me. The room was a mess, clothes strewn about, drawers left open. And there, on Anthony's nightstand, was a framed photo I'd never seen before. A blonde woman, laughing as she embraced my husband. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bed, clutching the photo. This couldn't be happening, not after everything we'd been through. The sound of a car pulling up jolted me back to reality. Voices drifted up from outside Anthony's, and a woman's laughter I didn't recognize. I crept to the window, peering out from behind the curtain. There he was, helping a stunning blonde out of his car. They were laden with grocery bags, laughing and talking like a couple. My world tilted on its axis. I stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. The crash echoed through the house. "Hello?" Anthony's voice called from downstairs. "Is someone there?" Footsteps on the stairs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The bedroom door swung open, and there he stood. Anthony's eyes widened in shock. "Kate, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, the blonde appeared behind him. "Anthony, who is it?" "Oh." She stopped short, her eyes darting between us. "Bethany," Anthony said, his voice strained. "This is Kate, my wife." The silence that followed was deafening. Bethany's face drained of color. "Wife? You're married?" I found my voice, cold and sharp as ice. "Yes, he is, though apparently that means little to him these days." Anthony stepped forward, his hands raised placatingly. "Kate, it's not what you think. I can explain." "Explain?" I spat, fury rising in me. "Explain how you're living with another woman while I've been working my ass off in Chicago? Explain how you've been ignoring my calls, making me worry sick?" Bethany backed away, her eyes wide with horror. "I had no idea. He told me he was divorced. I'm so sorry. Get out," I hissed, my gaze never leaving Anthony's face. "Both of you. Get out of my house." Anthony's face crumpled. "Kate, please, let me explain. There's so much you don't know." "Like what?" I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "Like how you've been lying to me? To her? What else don't I know, Anthony?" In my rage, I forgot myself. My hand, which had been protectively covering my stomach, fell away. Anthony's eyes dropped to my midsection, and I saw the exact moment realization dawned on him. "Kate," he whispered, all color draining from his face. Are you pregnant?" The room spun around me. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't how he was supposed to find out. Bethany gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she murmured, backing out of the room. I stood there, trembling, as the full weight of the situation crashed down on me. My marriage was in shambles, my husband was a liar, and I was carrying a child into this mess. Anthony took a step towards me, his hand outstretched. "Kate, don't," I said, my voice break. "Just don't." I pushed past him, nearly running down the stairs and out of the house. The fresh air hit me like a slap, and I gulped it down, trying to clear my head. As I stood on the lawn, my world crumbling around me, I realized I had a choice to make. I could stay and fight for a marriage that might already be beyond saving, or I could walk away and forge a new path for myself and my unborn child. The decision loomed before me, as daunting as it was inevitable. Whatever I chose, there would be no going back. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Anthony paced behind me, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. "Kate, please," he pleaded. "Just let me explain." I whirled around, anger bubbling up inside me. "Explain what, Anthony? How you've been living with another woman while I've been busting my ass in Chicago. How you've been lying to me for months." He flinched at my words. "It's not like that. Bethany, she's just a friend. She needed a place to stay, and—" "A friend?" I scoffed. "Is that why you were holding her in that photo? Why you've been ignoring my calls?" Anthony's face crumpled. "I was lonely, Kate. You were gone, and I felt lost." His words hit me like a physical blow. "And I wasn't. You think it was easy for me, being away from you, dealing with this pregnancy alone?" Silence fell between us, heavy and oppressive. Anthony's eyes were fixed on my swollen belly, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. I laughed bitterly. "When, Anthony? Between your ignored calls and vague text messages? Or maybe I should have mentioned it while you were busy playing house with Bethany." He stepped towards me, his hand outstretched. "Kate, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I felt like I was losing you to your career." I backed away, my heart pounding. "So you decided to replace me?" "No," he exclaimed. "It wasn't like that. I was confused and Bethany was there and—" "Stop," I cut him off. "I don't want to hear it. You made your choice, Anthony." Just then my phone buzzed. It was Jason Hendricks. I answered, desperate for a distraction. "Kate," Jason's voice was urgent. "Where are you? The board meeting starts in an hour and we need you here." I closed my eyes, torn between my crumbling personal life and my career. I'm not sure I can make it, Jason." "Kate," he said, his voice softening. "I know things are complicated right now, but this meeting could make or break our entire strategy. I need you." I looked at Anthony, who was watching me intently. In that moment, I made my decision. "I'll be there," I told Jason, ending the call. Anthony's face fell. "You're leaving? Now?" I moved past him, grabbing my purse. "What did you expect, Anthony? That I'd just forgive and forget? That we'd play happy families after what you've done?" He grabbed my arm, his eyes pleading. "Kate, please, don't go. We need to talk about this, about the baby." I yanked my arm away. "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." As I reached for the door, it swung open. Bethany stood there, her eyes red-rimmed. "Kate," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Anthony told me you were divorced, that—" "Save it," I snapped. "I don't want to hear it from either of you." I pushed past her, my heart racing. As I climbed into my car, I could see Anthony and Bethany in the doorway, both looking lost and confused. Tears blurred my vision as I drove, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? How could I trust Anthony again, after this betrayal? As I pulled into the office parking lot, my phone buzzed again. A text from Melissa, Anthony's newly discovered half-sister. "Kate, we need to talk. It's about Anthony and Bethany. There's something you need to know." My hand shook as I read the message. What more could there possibly be? How many more secrets and lies could I uncover? I sat in my car, one hand on my belly, the other clutching my phone. In a matter of hours, my entire world had been turned upside down. My marriage was in shambles, my career hanging by a thread, and now this cryptic message from Melissa. As I stared at the office building looming before me, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Whatever decision I made next would change the course of my life forever. The question was, did I have the strength to face what lay ahead? I sat across from Melissa in a quiet cafe, my hands wrapped around a cup of herbal tea. The aroma did little to calm my churning stomach. "Kate, I'm so sorry about everything," Melissa began, her eyes filled with genuine concern. "I had no idea things would unravel like this when I reached out to you." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Melissa leaned forward, her voice low. "There's something you need to know about Bethany. She's not just some random woman Anthony met. She's the daughter of Robert Hendricks." The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Robert Hendricks, Anthony's boss and the CEO of the company he worked for. The same company that was now my biggest client in Chicago. "What?" I whispered, my mind reeling. How do you know this?" Melissa sighed. "I did some digging after I met you. I wanted to understand my newfound family better. It turns out Bethany has been working for her father's company, trying to prove herself. She was assigned to work closely with Anthony on a project." The pieces started falling into place. The late-night calls Anthony claimed were work-related, the sudden business trips, the growing distance between us. It all made sense now. "Does Anthony know?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Melissa shook her head. "I don't think so. From what I've gathered, Bethany kept her connection to Robert Hendricks a secret. She wanted to succeed on her own merits." I laughed bitterly, and instead she ended up in bed with a married man. As the weight of this new information settled on me, my phone buzzed. It was Jason Hendricks, Robert's son and my direct contact at the company. "Kate, we need you in the office. Now. There's been a development with the merger, and we need your expertise." I ended the call, my mind racing. I had a choice to make: confront Anthony and Bethany with this new information, or focus on my career and the crucial merger that hung in the balance. Melissa reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Kate, what are you going to do?" I stood up, a plan forming in my mind. "I'm going to take control of this situation. All of it." An hour later, I walked into the Hendricks Corporation building, my head held high. As I entered the conference room, I saw Jason, Robert, and to my surprise, Bethany and Anthony. The tension in the room was palpable. Anthony's eyes widened when he saw me, a mix of guilt, confusion on his face. Bethany looked pale, her gaze darting between me and her father. Robert Hendricks stood, his face a mask of professional calm. "Ah, Kate, thank you for joining us. We were just discussing the merger and some personal matters that have come to light." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I'm aware of the situation, Mr. Hendricks, and I believe I have a solution that will benefit everyone involved." All eyes were on me as I laid out my proposal, a restructuring of the merger that would not only save both companies millions, but also ensure a clear separation between personal and professional relationships. As I spoke, I could see the admiration in Jason's eyes, the grudging respect in Robert's, and the dawning realization in Anthony and Bethany's. When I finished, silence filled the room. Robert was the first to speak. "Impressive, Mrs. Lawson, very impressive indeed. I believe we have a way forward." As the meeting adjourned, Anthony tried to approach me. "Kate, I held up a hand, stopping him. "Not now, Anthony. We'll talk later." I walked out of the conference room, my head spinning. I had just saved my career and exposed the truth about Anthony and Bethany's relationship. But at what cost? As I stood in the elevator, one hand resting on my growing belly, I realized that this was just the beginning. The real battle, for my marriage, my family, and my future, was yet to come. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I was Kate Lawson, and I was done being a victim of circumstance. It was time to write my own story. I stood outside Anthony's office, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath, smoothed my blazer over my now prominent baby bump, and pushed the door open. Anthony looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Kate, what are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Bethany walked in, her eyes widening as she saw me. "Oh, I didn't realize you had a meeting." I smiled, a calm settling over me. "I don't, but we all need to talk." Anthony stood, his face pale. "Kate, please, not here, not now." "Now is exactly the right time," I said, my voice steady. "Bethany, there's something you need to know, about Anthony, about me, and about your father." Bethany's brow furrowed. "My father? What does he have to do with this?" I took a step forward. "Everything. You see, Bethany, Anthony isn't just your coworker, he's my husband." The color drained from Bethany's face. She turned to Anthony, her voice barely a whisper. "Is this true?" Anthony nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Bethany. I never meant for things to go this far." Tears welled up in Bethany's eyes. "How could you? Both of you. Was this some kind of sick game?" I shook my head. "No, Bethany. I only found out recently about your connection to Robert Hendricks. Anthony didn't know either. We've all been pawns in a much bigger game." Just then, Robert Hendricks himself walked in, his face a mask of concern. "What's going on here?" "Bethany? Mrs. Lawson?" I turned to face him, my chin held high. "Mr. Hendricks, I think it's time we all laid our cards on the table. Your daughter and my husband have been having an affair that I believe you orchestrated to manipulate both our companies." Robert's face hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Lawson. I suggest you think carefully before you continue." "Oh, I have," I replied, pulling out a file from my bag. "I've thought about it very carefully, and I have proof of your attempts to sabotage the merger, using your daughter and my husband as unwitting pawns." The room fell silent as I laid out the evidence: emails, financial records, and testimonies from other employees. With each revelation, I could see Robert's composure crumbling. Bethany turned to her father, her voice shaking. "Dad, is this true? Did you use me?" Robert's shoulders sagged. "Bethany, I only wanted what was best for the company, for our family. By destroying mine," I interjected, my hand resting on my belly. Anthony's eyes widened as he finally registered my pregnancy. "Kate, I nodded. "Yes, Anthony, I'm pregnant. With your child. A child who deserves better than the lies and manipulation we've all been caught up in." The next few hours were a blur of confessions, tears, and hard truths. By the end of it, Robert Hendricks had resigned, Anthony had been dismissed, and Bethany had walked out, unable to face any of us. As I left the office building for the last time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had faced my fears, stood up for myself, and come out stronger on the other side. 6 months later, I cradled my newborn daughter in my arms, gazing out at the Chicago skyline from my corner office. I had been promoted to vice president after exposing the corruption within Hendricks Corporation. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was one I had fought for and earned. Anthony and I had divorced, but we were working on building a new relationship as co-parents. Bethany had reached out, apologizing and asking for a fresh start, and Melissa, my unexpected ally through it all, had become a dear friend and my daughter's godmother. As I looked down at my sleeping child, I realized that sometimes life's greatest challenges lead to our most profound transformations. I had lost a husband, but gained a family. I had faced betrayal, but found my own strength. And in the end, I had achieved the balance I had always dreamed of: a fulfilling career and the joy of motherhood. I was Kate Lawson, single mother, corporate executive, and survivor. And this was just the beginning of our story. "Happy birthday, babe!" Jonah's cheerful voice rung out as he entered the dimly lit restaurant, a small gift box in his hand. I couldn't help but beam at the sight of my boyfriend of 5 years. "You didn't have to get me anything," I said, pulling him into an embrace, like I'd missed the chance to spoil my girl on her birthday. Jonah grinned and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. We settled into our usual corner booth, the flicker of candlelight dancing across the red checkered tablecloth. As we caught up over breadsticks and wine, something seemed off about Jonah's demeanor. He kept glancing toward the entrance, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Before I could inquire, the door swung open, and a familiar face sauntered in. My cousin Celine, looking runway-ready in a skin-tight crimson dress that left little to the imagination. "Sorry I'm late," Celine sing-songed, draping herself over Jonah to plant an audacious kiss on his cheek. Traffic was just dreadful. My stomach bottomed out as realization struck. This wasn't just a family dinner. Jonah had planned this, whatever this was. "Celine, I'm surprised to see you here." The words felt like shards of glass in my mouth. "Well, when Jonah invited me to celebrate your birthday, how could I refuse?" She looped her arm through his with a sickly sweet smile. "He insisted we needed a reunion." My hands trembled as I clutched my napkin, my gaze flickering between my cousin and my boyfriend, silently begging one of them to reveal this was an elaborate joke. But Jonah wouldn't meet my eyes, his face flushed with guilt. The air grew thick with tension until Celine broke the silence with a melodic giggle. "Oh, Lena, you should see your face. I suppose the cat's out of the bag now." She nuzzled closer to Jonah, her perfectly manicured nails tracing his arm. "We didn't mean for you to find out this way, but Jonah and I are in love." The world collapsed around me in that instant. My ears rang as Jonah muttered something about trying to find the right time, and Celine prattled on about fate bringing them together. I was vaguely aware of other patrons gawking at our train wreck of a scene, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Hot, angry tears streamed down my cheeks, blurring my vision of these two despicable people before me. In that moment, all the history, all the betrayals and toxic dynamics of my relationship with Celine came rushing back with the force of a tsunami. The cousin I once considered a sister, who had torn me down at every turn and sabotaged any happiness I found. Now she'd taken the one person I trusted above all others. "How could you?" I choked out, bobbing my head between them. With her?" Jonah opened his mouth to respond, that familiar crease furrowing his brow, but I shoved myself away from the table with such force, my chair clattered to the floor. "Save it," I spat, snatching up my purse. "I can't even look at you two right now." I stormed out with as much dignity as I could muster, leaving behind the shattered remnants of the life I thought I knew. My world had shifted on its axis, throwing me violently off kilter, and there was no way to regain my balance, not after this unforgivable betrayal. I spent the night tossing and turning, replaying the horrific scene at the restaurant over and over. How could Jonah, the man I thought I knew better than myself, betray me in such a cruel way? And with Celine of all people, my own flesh and blood. The next morning, I dragged myself to Aunt Mara's place, desperate for some familial comfort and support. She pulled me into a tight hug as soon as I stepped through the door, her eyes full of pity. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," she soothed, guiding me to the living room couch. "I can't believe those two did this to you." Sniffling back tears, I searched her face for answers. Did you know about them?" Aunt Mara sighed deeply, wringing her hands. "I had my suspicions, but I didn't want to believe it. Not without proof." My heart plummeted. "What do you mean, suspicions? For how long has this been going on?" "A few months at least," she admitted reluctantly. "Celine has always been manipulative, pulling strings to get what she wants. I just hoped the family connection would stop her from going that far." White-hot rage bubbled up inside me. "You knew she was up to something, and you didn't warn me?" "I didn't have any solid evidence, Lena, just little things here and there that seemed off. By the time I put it together, I was already the punchline," I finished bitterly. "Played for a fool by the man I loved and my own cousin." "I wanted to protect you both," Aunt Mara insisted. "Celine, she's troubled, yes, but she's still family. I hoped I could appeal to that part of her, the part that used to adore you like a sister." I barked out a harsh laugh. "She sure has a funny way of showing it. Don't you remember how close you two used to be?" Aunt Mara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "You were inseparable as kids, thicker than thieves. What happened between you?" The memories came flooding back. Summers spent choreographing dance routines, sharing snacks during sleepovers, whispering secrets and dreams in the dead of night. We'd been best friends, partners in crime, until high school, when a rift formed, an invisible wedge driving us further and further apart each year. "I don't know," I lied, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. Of course, I knew what had torn our bond to shreds, but dredging up old wounds would only lead to more pain. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us before Aunt Mara spoke again. "Celine has always been jealous of you, you know. All your accomplishments, your kind heart, your integrity, she's never had that solid moral core." My jaw ticked as an idea blossomed in the back of my mind. "Well, this time her lack of integrity has gone too far. I won't let her get away with this." "Lena," Aunt Mara looked stricken, "I know you're hurting, but seeking revenge won't heal those wounds. It will only breed more toxicity." "I'm not looking for revenge," I stated coolly, squaring my shoulders. "I just want justice. For once, I want Celine to face the consequences for her cruelty and manipulation, and I'm going to make sure she does." Aunt Mara opened her mouth to protest further, but I cut her off with a raised hand. "Thanks for being honest with me, Aunt Mara. I think I know what I need to do now." I stood abruptly and marched toward the front door, a newfound determination igniting in my chest. If Aunt Mara wouldn't help me expose her devious daughter, I would find a way to bring Celine down on my own, no matter what it took. The next few weeks at Wilson Elementary were a welcome distraction. I threw myself into preparing for the upcoming science fair, my mind focused on supporting my students' projects rather than dwelling on my personal turmoil. That fragile peace shattered when I strode into the staff lounge one morning to find Celine perched on the battered couch, sipping coffee from a world's best teacher mug like she owned the place. "Well, if it isn't my favorite cousin," she purred, eyeing me over the rim of her mug. "Long time no see." I gritted my teeth, clutching my lesson plan so tightly the edges crumpled. "What are you doing here, Celine?" "Working, of course." She batted her lashes innocently. "Didn't you hear? I'm spearheading a new after-school community program." Of course she was. Celine always had to slither her way into anything good, tainting it with her poisonous presence. "At an elementary school? Forgive me if I have a hard time picturing you embracing your charitable side." Celine tsked, setting her mug aside as she rose with feline grace. "Still so cynical, Lena, and here I thought teaching would have instilled you with a more nurturing nature." She moved closer until we were toe-to-toe, her sickly sweet perfume overwhelming my senses. "You see, this program will provide after-school tutoring, mentoring, all sorts of enrichment activities. A worthwhile pursuit, no?" My mind raced, putting together the pieces. "You're going after the grant for underprivileged students, the one funding our science fair, trying to sabotage my work, again." Laughing lightly, Celine trailed a fingertip down my arm, making my skin crawl. "Always so suspicious, cousin. Can't it be possible that we simply had the same idea?" I jerked backward out of her reach. "We both know that's not true. You're threatened by anything that might make me happy or successful." Celine's perfectly shaped brows arched in mock offense. "My, what a negative perception you have of me, and after everything we've been through together." Memories of our ruined friendship, years of betrayal and emotional manipulation flashed through my mind in rapid succession, like pretending to be my friend while secretly undermining me at every turn. I shook my head vehemently. "I'm not falling for your games anymore, Celine. The gloves are off." "Is that so?" She leaned in until I could make out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Well, in that case, game on, dear cousin. May the best woman win." With a wink, Celine sauntered away, hips swaying provocatively. I stared after her, my fists clenched at my sides, jaw ticking. She thought she could walk all over me, using her usual manipulative tactics to steal my happiness, my success, my very livelihood. But not this time. This time I would be ready for her. This time I would fight back with everything I had. Because if Celine thought for 1 second that I would go down without a battle royale, she was sorely mistaken. After her betrayal with Jonah, I had nothing left to lose, and Celine was about to learn just how determined a woman could be when she had vengeance driving her every move. After my confrontation with Celine at school, I knew I needed to take serious action to undermine her campaign before it gained traction. But I barely had time to strategize, with science fair preparations and dealing with her constant needling about the grant proposal. That's when Alex Taylor darkened my doorstep one crisp October evening. I furrowed my brow at the unfamiliar face as I pulled open the door. "Can I help you? Lena Morgan?" The man gave me a tight smile, eyes rimmed by purplish half-moons. "I'm Alex, Celine's ex-fiancé." My eyebrows shot up. I'd had no idea Celine was that serious with anyone, let alone engaged. Though it made sense, she was the queen of putting on airs, playing the role of blushing bride-to-be. "I don't understand. What are you doing here?" "I came to offer my condolences," he said gruffly, "and maybe get a little—" He paused, mouth twisting wryly. "Vengeance." I stared at him blankly for a beat before stepping aside to usher him in. He brushed past me, already making himself at home on my sofa. "I'm sorry, I'm still confused. Are you saying you want revenge on Celine? Your ex?" "Ex is putting it mildly," Alex snorted derisively. "More like the vengeful succubus who drained me of every last penny I had before discarding me like trash." The pain etched in the lines of his face was achingly familiar. I settled in the armchair across from him, sympathy stirring. "I think I can relate," I murmured. "She has a way of completely destroying people, doesn't she?" Alex's jaw tightened as he nodded. "You know, for months I suspected she was being unfaithful, overstepping boundaries with strange men. It wasn't until her latest twisted scheme that I caught her red-handed." Red-hot rage simmered just beneath the surface of his voice. "That's when Celine finally confessed her dalliance with some nobody named Jonah. Left me at the altar to go slithering into his bed." My heart seized at the mention of Jonah's name, the wound still agonizingly fresh. Of course he would be Celine's ultimate prize. She couldn't resist taking the man I loved most in the cruelest way possible. So she played you both, I said quietly. Manipulated your lives, your emotions, all for her own selfish gain. She's a first-rate psychopath. Alex pinned me with a hard stare. Which is why I came to you. You're not the only one she's burned, Lena. And if we team up, maybe we can finally make that snake pay for her misdeeds. I searched his face, seeing the echoes of my own pain and frustration mirrored back at me. Joining forces. It wasn't something I'd considered before in my quest for retribution. But having an ally with intimate knowledge of Celine's depravity, her Achilles heel, that could be invaluable ammunition. My lips curved into a slow smile. You're right, Alex. She has ruined far too many lives through her lies and treachery. I leaned forward, holding his gaze steadily. So what did you have in mind? Justice and vengeance were a deadly combination, and with her ex in my arsenal, I was about to become an unstoppable force. Watch out, Celine. This time, you knocked on the wrong door. Over the next few weeks, Alex and I fell into an easy camaraderie as we plotted our campaign against Celine. Having an insider's perspective into her psyche and past manipulations proved invaluable. You know, she nearly bankrupted an entire charity I was on the board of? Alex shook his head in disgust one night over takeout containers littering my coffee table. Somehow she managed to siphon funds into her own accounts, all while acting as the face of the organization. I'm not surprised, I muttered, popping a leftover egg roll in my mouth. Celine has always loved being the center of attention, playing the hero, as long as it benefited her in the end. Alex nodded grimly. By the time we realized what she'd done, it was too late to recover most of the money. The charity folded within months, his fists clenched on the tabletop. All those people who donated in good faith, all those lives we could have helped, it makes me sick just thinking about it. Reaching across, I placed my hand over his in a comforting gesture. I'm so sorry, Alex. I had no idea she could be that monstrous. He let out a harsh exhale, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. You're one of the few who's seen her true colors, Lena, the reality behind that sugary sweet facade. I couldn't help but snort at that. Oh, I've had a front row seat to her greatest hits over the years, believe me, like the time she stole my boyfriend all through junior year, just because she knew I liked him. Alex arched an eyebrow. This was a pattern for her? Using guys to get what she wants from her friends and family? Among other things. I waved a hand dismissively. Don't get me started on the time she sabotaged performances, bad-mouthed me to teachers, the vicious pranks and rumors. A heavy silence fell between us as I trailed off, remembering the dark spiral of those teenage years. How utterly alone and beaten down I'd felt, like I was losing my grip on reality with Celine's relentless torment. Until one day, something inside me had simply snapped. After that, I shut her out completely, eschewing her manipulative games and focusing on salvaging what self-worth I had left. I blinked, shoving those memories aside as Alex watched me intently. The point is, Celine's depravity knows no bounds. She's a cancerous presence, leeching off those around her until they have nothing left to give. Except this time, we're putting a stop to it. His voice was low and resolute. This time, that vengeful harpy will be the one left with nothing when we're through with her. I held his gaze, my chest swelling with righteous determination. You're damn right. She's about to learn that karma can be one cruel mistress. Celine thought she could slither her way through life, preying on innocent victims without consequence. But she was about to face the ultimate punishment, having her own wicked deeds thrown back in her face for all to see. And Alex and I would be the ones to administer that deliciously brutal justice. My cousin's reign of terror was about to come to a permanent, humiliating end. After all, nobody duped Lena Morgan and got away with it, not even family. Over the next few months, Alex and I worked tirelessly to gather ammunition against Celine. Bank statements, recordings, eyewitness accounts, we left no stone unturned in exposing her trail of deception. Finally, we had enough evidence to bury her. All that was left was to decide how to detonate the bomb. This has to be a spectacle, Alex insisted one evening as we pored over our extensive files on Celine. A public reckoning where she can't slither away or spin her usual lies. I nodded slowly, an idea taking shape. You're right. We need to hit her where it hurts. Her reputation, her fragile ego, her desire to be admired. In a flash of inspiration, I remembered the community outreach program Celine was coordinating at my school, the one that directly threatened funding for my science fair. I've got it, I said, a slow smile spreading. We hijack her precious community event, take it over, and reveal every sordid detail of her con artistry in front of her elite donors and would-be admirers. A feral grin split Alex's face. Now that's the kind of vengeance I'm talking about. Rip away the facade so they can see her for the viper she truly is. Over the next few weeks, we began coordinating an elaborate sting operation, complete with a multimedia presentation and eyewitness speakers to validate our claims. Alex's forceful charisma and my insider access to the event made us a formidable team. Still, as the day drew nearer, tendrils of doubt began creeping in. What if Celine managed to slither her way out of this too? What if our efforts only bruised her ego briefly before she inevitably regained control? I shoved those thoughts aside. This was my one chance to take her down for good, to stop the cycle of torment once and for all. There would be no going back. The night before the event, I tossed and turned, alternating between anxiety and bristling anticipation. When I finally surrendered to fitful slumber, my dreams were plagued with haunting images of Celine's past cruelties. I awoke just before dawn in a cold sweat, my heart thundering against my ribcage. It's time to end this once and for all. Later that morning, I strode into the convention center with my head held high, Alex at my side carrying the hard drive containing the evidence. We settled into our seats near the front, watching through narrowed eyes as the space filled with members of the community. Right on schedule, Celine swept in like a conquering hero, basking in the adulation as she took her place on the stage, smiling that brilliant, insincere smile of hers as the audience applauded. For a moment, a flicker of doubt gnawed at me. This woman had tormented me for decades, always staying one step ahead, dodging each attempt I made to take her down. What made me think this time would be any different? Then I caught her gaze raking the audience, that predatory hunger in her eyes, and my resolve solidified like steel. This is it. No more excuses, no more running. Time to pay the piper, cousin. Beside me, Alex must have sensed my shift, giving me the slightest nod of encouragement. As Celine launched into her opening remarks, I stood abruptly and strode down the aisle toward the stage, each step fueled by a potent mix of anger, fear, but most of all, vindication. This time, she was the one about to get played, and I couldn't wait to watch her entire world unravel. Celine's mouth fell open in stunned outrage as I snatched the microphone from her perfectly manicured grip. "Good morning, everyone," I said, amazed by the steady timbre of my voice. "I'm afraid there's been a bit of a change in programming today." Murmurs rippled through the audience as I turned to face them fully. "My name is Lena Morgan, and I have some deeply disturbing information to share about the woman you've all come to celebrate." Celine recovered quickly, that too-bright smile stretching her lips as she moved to take back the mic. "Why, cousin, whatever are you going on about? Surely you're not still upset over that little misunderstanding with Jonah." "This has nothing to do with Jonah," I cut her off sharply, though I'll be sure to fill him in on the lurid details later. From the front row, Alex sprang into action, firing up the multimedia presentation we'd spent weeks meticulously curating, bank statements, audio recordings, testimonies from Celine's past victims. A vivid portrait of greed, duplicity, and sociopathic behavior. As the first damning piece of evidence flashed across the screens, a stunned hush fell over the room. I could taste the disbelief, the palpable sense that these upstanding community members were having the veil ripped away from their eyes. Including Jonah, who sat frozen beside me, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as each new monstrous transgression was revealed. "No, Celine, tell me this isn't true," he rasped out, face ashen. "Please, baby, I need to hear your side." But Celine seemed to have been rendered momentarily mute, her eyes wild and desperate as they ping-ponged between the screens and her dwindling audience. I watched the smug veneer cracking in real time, reveling in the glorious destruction. The evidence speaks for itself, I'm afraid. This is the real Celine Reynolds, a pathological liar and con artist who walks through life taking everything she can get her claws into. Finally, snapping out of her trance, Celine turned murderous eyes on me. "How dare you?" she seethed, manicured nails digging into her palms. "You've always been jealous of me, Lena, trying to sabotage everything I've worked for with your sad, empty life." A bitter laugh burst from my lips. "Are you kidding me right now? I'm the one with the sad life?" I shook my head, suddenly numb to the scrutiny of the dwindling crowd. All I could focus on was the wretched woman crumbling before me like a house of cards. "For years you belittled me, stole from me, stomped on my dreams and relationships, all because your pathetic ego couldn't stand me having any shred of happiness." My voice dripped with years of built-up venom. "Well, no more, Celine. I'm done being your punching bag." Stalking forward, I threw every ounce of my anger and disgust into my parting jab. "From this moment on, you'll be just another washed-up, disgraced nobody, alone and empty, with nothing but your greed and jealousy to keep you company." For a long, delicious moment, Celine and I stared each other down, twin infernos of rage and anguish blazing in our eyes. Then she was scrambling off the stage in a flurry of tears and screeching protests as the convention center erupted into pandemonium. I stood frozen center stage, the cyclone of chaos swirling around me as Jonah and Alex, then others, rushed up to comfort or confront me. But their voices were muffled, drowned out by the deafening thrum of victory pounding through my veins. After over a decade of torment at Celine's hands, she had finally received her comeuppance. And as the last embers of her reputation went up in flames all around me, I savored the blissful sense of release. A heavy burden had been lifted. The mental shackles that had bound me to her toxicity for so long were at last obliterated, leaving me lighter than I'd felt in years. My war with Celine was over, and I, Lena Morgan, had emerged the undisputed victor. The fallout from the community center showdown was swift and brutal. Within days, Celine's sordid history had made headlines across the city. Corporate sponsors dropped her program like a scorching stone. The very people who had fawned over her were now turning their backs in droves, sickened by her deceit. As for me, I reveled in every salacious detail, reading each new expose with a mixture of vindication and pity for my shattered cousin. While part of me felt a twinge of remorse for dismantling her so thoroughly, the larger part simply basked in the euphoria of being free from her toxic stranglehold. Jonah tried, unsuccessfully, to convince me he'd been an unwitting victim of Celine's manipulations, as if that absolved him of his own culpability in devastating me. "I'm so sorry, Lena," he pleaded during one of his endless voicemails. "I never meant to hurt you like this. You have to know that, deep down. Celine, she's a master at deception, twisting things to suit her needs." I snorted at the familiar litany of excuses, easily deleting the message. If Jonah thought a few puppy dog apologies could erase the gut-wrenching betrayal of his actions, he had another thing coming. I was well and truly done with him. The only person who seemed to fully understand my newfound sense of peace was Alex. My unlikely ally had become an irreplaceable part of my life through the hellish months we spent plotting downfall. "Feels good to breathe freely again, doesn't it?" He grinned over glasses of celebratory wine one evening. Like a 1,000-pound weight has finally been lifted. I clinked my glass to his with a satisfied smile. Something like that. I honestly didn't realize how much of my life was shackled by that woman until I detached myself from her venom. Leaning back on the couch, I felt the tension bleed from my shoulders, an unfamiliar but welcome sensation. I spent so many years terrified of her, jumping at every shadow, always wondering when the next attack would come. I shook my head slowly. But now, that hold is shattered. She has zero power over me. To moving on from toxic influences, Alex raised his glass in a salute. May we never look back. Here, here. As the weeks passed, that cathartic energy fueled me with a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. I refocused my efforts at school, investing every ounce of passion into my students' projects and the upcoming science fair. The first time one of my kids won a grant for their legitimately brilliant proposal, pride swelled in my chest. This was what I was meant for, nurturing young minds and helping them spread their wings, uninhibited by the toxic cloud of jealousy and deception I'd lived under for so long. At the ceremony, Aunt Mara swept me into her arms, tears shining in her eyes. Oh, Lena, I'm so proud of you, she whispered fiercely. The strength and resilience you've shown. She pulled back, cupping my face tenderly. Your parents would have been in awe of the woman you've become, leaving that poisonous influence behind for good. I blinked back my own tears as her words washed over me. Perhaps for the first time, I truly appreciated the journey that had led me to this point. Every anguished step had built fortitude, sharpened my spirit, reminded me of who I was and who I wanted to be. As I stood on that stage, clutching my award with students cheering me on, I felt something shift fundamentally inside. A lingering shroud lifted, allowing the light to flood in at last. Celine no longer haunted me, her shadow permanently banished by the brilliant future shining ahead. I had been to the darkest depths and clawed my way into the blazing truth. Nothing and nobody would dim my spirit again.